This wasn't just our favorite cruise ever, this was our favorite vacation ever. Hey, thanks for watching. I'm Jeff, and if a cruise or visit to Australia isn't on your bucket list, it probably will be after this video. We spent a year and a half planning this vacation, but it almost didn't happen. We wanted to visit as much of Australia as we possibly could, and we found a repositioning cruise on the Majestic Princess that was perfect. It left Sydney on February 12, 2020, and visited Hobart, Tasmania, Melbourne, Adelaide, and Busselton before ending the cruise in Perth. The ship was then scheduled to continue on to Singapore, but more about that later. All in all, it was a 10-day cruise for us. You may remember that in late 2019 and early 2020, Australia was on fire. We didn't know if we'd be able to go or even if we should go with this disaster raging all across the country. After lots of consideration, we decided to go ahead with our trip, and I'm glad we did. We flew into Sydney about 5 days before the cruise to see the sights and to recuperate from the 16-hour flight. And when we got off the plane, we were met with torrential rain. Now, normally we'd be disappointed because the rain was putting a damper on our vacation, but under the circumstances, we were happy that it was raining and bringing some of those fires under control. I'll do another video that talks about our adventures in Sydney, but for now, let's skip right to the cruise. In mid-February of 2020, there were rumblings about some virus coming out of China. You may have heard about it. It was in the news a little bit. So when we were boarding, we just had to fill out a sheet stating that we were feeling okay. We got on board quickly and found our stateroom before heading to the buffet for a quick lunch. This is one of the most iconic ports in the world. On one side of the ship, you have the Sydney Harbour Bridge. On the other side, you have the Sydney Opera House. It's an amazing view. Okay, let me get all of the obligatory stuff out of the way. The food was great. I've never had a bad meal on a Princess cruise. The staff and the service were all top-notch, no complaints at all. The production shows were wonderful. The guest performers, I felt, fell a little short, and oddly enough, there was no magician on the cruise. I always look forward to a magic show, so I was a little disappointed when they didn't have one. Our first stop was in Hobart, Tasmania, and one thing that really shocked me was the amount of graffiti in and around Hobart. It's everywhere, on walls, on buildings, even on the roads. It's such a stark contrast to the natural beauty all around Hobart. Our excursion first visited the Bonarong Wildlife Sanctuary, where they rescue injured and orphaned animals. The largest part of the facility is a big open space where you can walk around and meet kangaroos face to face. They also have a wide assortment of other Australian wildlife, including Tasmanian devils, wallabies, echidnas, emus, koalas, and much more. By the way, if your dream is to pet or hold a koala, you should know that right now there are only 3 states that allow you to hold koalas: Queensland, South Australia, and Western Australia. In most other states, you can get close to them for a photo op, but touching isn't allowed. Our next day was a day at sea as we headed to Melbourne. During the day, there was an announcement from the captain that raised a few eyebrows, and although we didn't know it at the time, it turned out to be an omen of things to come. Now, we were ending our cruise in Perth, but many passengers were continuing on to the final destination of Singapore. The captain announced that due to concerns about that new virus, the cruise would be ending for everyone in Perth. They couldn't guarantee that the port in Singapore would even be open when they got there, and they didn't want to have a ship full of passengers stuck at sea. Most passengers were understanding, and some were even a little relieved because we'd been hearing more and more about this new virus. In Melbourne, there were a ton of things we wanted to do, but we finally decided on a trip to the Dandenong Ranges and a ride on the Puffing Billy train. The scenery was gorgeous. We saw tons of cockatoos, and the 4-mile ride on the Puffing Billy steam train was a lot of fun. If you find cruising and visiting unusual places interesting, please consider subscribing to the Backroads Tourist channel. It's free, and it really helps out the channel. I'd also appreciate it if you would click that like button on this video if you're enjoying hearing about our Australian adventure. After another day at sea, we stopped in Adelaide. Our excursion today was to the Cleland Wildlife Sanctuary. Our hope was that we'd finally be able to hold a koala here, since this was one of the states where contact was allowed. Unfortunately, koala encounters were scheduled for 2 p.m., and we had to be on our tour bus all the way across the park at 2:10, so we didn't get a chance to pet or hold a koala. However, we did get another chance to pet and interact with dozens of kangaroos and wallabies. We had 2 more days at sea, which were very relaxing. Now, there was always something going on, but many times we just went back to our stateroom and watched a movie or spent some time in the casino. Our next stop was Busselton. Now, Busselton's claim to fame is that they have the longest jetty in the southern hemisphere. It's over a mile long and even has a cute train that will get you from one end to the other. At the end of the jetty, you can buy tickets to go into the underwater observation tour, which takes you 8 meters below the surface. As you can see, the lighting isn't the best for pictures, but my wife and I really enjoyed it. We also walked into town, but there really wasn't that much to see or do in Busselton. We grabbed an ice cream cone and visited an outdoor market before coming back to the jetty and catching a tender back to the ship. Our cruise ended the next day in Perth, but we'd made plans to spend a couple of days in Perth before heading back to the States. One of the things we did in Perth was to take the ferry to Rottnest Island, home of the quokka, often called the friendliest animal on Earth. Now, although the name sounds horrible, Rottnest Island is seriously one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. In fact, I did a whole video on Rottnest, and I'll put up a link for you. So is it any wonder why we think this was the best cruise and the best vacation ever? We're both anxious to brave that 16-hour flight and visit Australia once again. There's so much to see, so much to do, and we know that we've only scratched the surface. Thanks for watching. I'm Jeff, and I'll see you on the back roads.